Hello everyone, Vulcan here, and this is my review of episode 10 of RWBY Volume 4. So quite a few things happen in this episode. We began with Oscar as he sets off on his journey to Mistral, and we also get to see a nice little flashback of Ren, as well as what he and Nora are up to now, as well as what Ruby and John have gotten up to. This episode basically confirms Renora is official, guys. That's it. Victory has been achieved. But I'll get to that later in this video. As Ruby's and Jean's parts of this episode are the least important, I'm going to start off with them. For starters, it's good to see that Crow's still hanging in there, albeit by a thread by the looks of it. Ruby and Jean both showed concern for Ren and Nora, particularly Jean, which to me is to be expected given they're not just on the same team, but they've also developed a brotherly bond. I was a bit disappointed that a follow-up to the end of episode 2 still doesn't seem to be coming any closer, although I was actually happy about the fact that there was some development in their relationship in general. Considering what happened to Crow, it's not surprising Ruby would be concerned about the rest of Team Ranger, and she apologized to Jean as she felt she dragged them into her journey. Aside from the fact that I don't quite get why she couldn't say it when both Ren and Nora were around, given that she's also talking about how they got dragged into it, Jean's response was nothing short of heartwarming, and to me confirms two things. First off, Jean points out how he and the rest of Team Juniper have lost Pyrrha. To me, this is confirmation that he is accepting the facts as they are. I had said since episode 2 that Jean training to Pyrrha's recording was a sign that he was fighting to accept the fact that Pyrrha was gone, rather than being unable to let her go. I suppose it could still be true that it could mean that he's not letting her go, but the fact that he's able to say that he lost Pyrrha shows that he is at least on his way to accepting it. This could be the closest we could get to a follow-up to episode 2 in this volume, so I'll take it for now. Secondly, Jean also mentions how in spite of Ruby losing her entire team, Penny, and Yang in some way, Ruby still stuck her head up high and pressed onwards to keep fighting the fight, and that gave Jean and the others the courage to move forward as well. This also makes sense to me because Jean himself didn't want to be left behind, and if he were to go home following the fall of Beacon, staying behind would have been the only thing left for him. He had every reason to run off and give it all up considering how much pain cheating his way into the academy had brought him, but he's determined not to let that bring him down. Ren and Nora themselves, being orphans, don't exactly have anywhere else to go, so following Ruby was the logical decision for them, at least in my opinion. By the way, hearing Penny's name for what I think is the first time in this entire volume was sensational. Onwards to Ren's flashback. Much of what happens in this was basically what most people could already guess without having to watch this. We've been given all kinds of hints throughout this volume that Ren's village had been attacked by Grimm, which led to him and Nora becoming orphans. Regarding that, however, it appears Nora was an orphan since before Ren was, and also apparently comes from very far away, as pointed out by the kids picking on her, saying that she was dressed weird and thus came from very far. I have to wonder though how she managed to travel such a long way on her own, considering how dangerous it is out there with all sorts of monsters who wouldn't hesitate to eat her alive, and that she's completely unarmed. Especially since that very night the village would eventually be attacked by a horde of such monsters, so they couldn't have been very far behind. Either way, seeing Ren and Nora meet for the first time was very nice, and what's interesting about Ren was that before the destruction of his village, he was the very definition of a wimp. He had his heart in the right place, evidently, but the moment he was given a look by the bullies, he was about to run off when his dad showed up, spurring all the other kids to run off instead. I really liked that what his dad told Ren. Sometimes the worst action one can take is to not take any action at all. That quote is probably going to be staying with me for a long time because it could explain a lot of what's going on in real life, but that's beside the point. It's quite significant for Ren as well because those words really changed him by the end of the flashback. That and his father's constant encouragement to take action was what I believe led to the activation of his aura and therefore his semblance. By the looks of things, Ren's semblance is invisibility, which would explain Nora's comment about him basically being a ninja. On the other hand, the thought crossed my mind that Ren's semblance is some kind of emotion suppressor, which could therefore make it impossible for the Grimm to sense him. Considering that Crow's semblance is literally a concept, it isn't completely impossible, but at the same time I'm not inclined to believe this because the Nevermore clearly appeared to be looking under the house where Ren and Nora were hiding, but evidently didn't see a thing. Additionally, when the giant beast Grimm walked right past them, Ren's semblance did not appear to be active, so if emotions are the way in which Grimm can see things, I'd have expected the Grimm to drag them out from their hiding spot. Assuming that this beast Grimm is highly intelligent, which may easily be the case, and I'll get to that in a moment. One could argue that it left Ren and Nora alive for a reason, but I cannot think of any particular reason, to be honest. To that Grimm, Ren and Nora were just inconsequential children who happened to live in the village that it was raiding. Perhaps there is something about them which is important, but this flashback didn't give any kind of indication either way. We also find out what it was that gave Nora the idea to create the kind of weapon that she uses now, and hearing a version of Boop here was admittedly really nice. Definitely a touching moment. We then get to see Ren and Nora in the present as they're making their way up the mountain. At this point, we get the second most obvious indication that Renora is official. We'll get the first most obvious indication later. When Ren asks her if she's okay, she replies, "I've got you here, don't I?" Yeah, we win, guys. We then see a cave on the side of the mountain, so at first it appears their path is blocked. Nora comments that there's wind coming out of it when she gets close, which could possibly therefore lead up to the peak of the mountain. A piece of paper suddenly flies straight into Ren's face. Come on, Ren, you're a huntsman. Your reflexes should be better than that. This paper, however, actually has the symbol of Shion village on it, which is weeks away according to Nora, and fits with what Yang said about having spent weeks training with her father in the last episode. As they ran in, I was half expecting to see a bunch of corpses, but it appeared to be instead filled with what is either blood or some kind of Grimm liquid, as it kind of looks like the liquid from which other Grimm sprang from back in episode 1. There were also a bunch of swords and other weapons there, which could mean that warriors from Shion escaped from the village and found refuge in this cave, although the Beast Grimm eventually found them anyways and had a feast. We know that it's the Beast Grimm from the flashback because we see the same footprint in the cave that we saw in the previous episodes, which also fits with what the heel of the Grimm looks like based on the flashback. I suppose this confirms that it's not in fact the symbol of Raven's bandit tribe, but a Grimm, although I do think there's a possibility Raven or someone close to her is capable of controlling them somehow. I'd like to say that it's the Spring Maiden, as many believe that that's who she's with, but a lot of you have commented that the only reason Cinder was able to control the Dragon Grimm was either because she was fused with the Bug Grimm, or because it was taught to her by Salem, or various other reasons. Whether or not that's the case, I think we're gonna know before long. At the moment, I stand by my theory, primarily because of what appears to be the relationship between Maidens, Grimm, and Silver Eyes, but that's a discussion for another time. We then hear the cry of a Grimm, which I think sounded exactly like the cry Jean heard earlier in the episode. This is most likely the Beast Grimm, because I think we also heard the cry during the flashback, just when Ren's father asked Ren and his mom what they were still doing inside the house. It is here that we see the biggest sign that Renora is official. Right here. This was beautiful, although also very worrying, because based on the way the trees were shaking, it's obvious that the Beast Grimm is headed toward Kuroyuri, where RWBY, Jean, and Crow are right now. Things definitely aren't looking very good for the team. The Beast Grimm itself looks awesome, and that's not because of how huge it is, because it is insanely huge if you look at how big its shadow is compared to Ren's father, but because it actually appears to either be two Grimm with one riding the other, or some kind of centaur Grimm which has both the head of a horse and a humanoid. I also have a feeling that because of its apparent form, this could be a highly evolved type of Grimm which is also very old and therefore experienced. It was noticed since way back that Grimm developed intelligence through experience over time, and this could easily be the case for the Beast Grimm, or if it's in the case of it being two Grimm, and this could be the case for the Grimm riding the other one. Finally, I want to talk about Oscar. I've saved this part for last despite it being the first part of the episode, because while part of me really did like this part of the episode, not to mention the fact that I'm really coming to like Oscar's character, I have major issues with this. The last time we saw Oscar, he was clearly struggling to accept the fact that Ozpin, Like's little boy, invaded his mind and was telling him things that seemed out of this world to him. Now, the next time we see him, which is in this episode, he's already come to the decision to leave home, and despite all the things Ozpin told him seeming to be crazy, he feels it's the right thing to do. Now, that escalated way too quickly if you ask me. Some of you will know how I compared Oscar to Luke Skywalker in his last appearance, and I feel I need to bring him up again because he's the perfect and most well-known example of how a story of a farm boy turning into a hero should be handled. Luke's decision to leave Tatooine at Obi-Wan's request was a very difficult one for him to make. Despite being told how his destiny is much larger than what's in store in that little moisture farm in the planet furthest from the center of the galaxy, not to mention his undying desire to join the Imperial Academy and become a starfighter pilot, Luke still held serious reservations about leaving home. It wasn't until he found the burned skeletons of his aunt and uncle next to the destroyed farm that he decided there was nothing left for him there and that he would go on to train as a Jedi Knight. On the other hand, Oscar never expressed any significant desire to leave. Of course, Ozpin said he wanted more than just the life of a farm boy, and we can accept that as Oscar's true feelings because Ozpin can read his every thought, although it would have had a better impact if such desires were expressed by Oscar himself rather than through an intermediary like Ozpin. Most importantly, we didn't get to see the process by which Oscar came to the decision to leave. Like Luke, he wanted a life of adventure, and like Luke, still hesitated strongly to leave home. Unlike Luke, nothing significant is shown to happen to Oscar that spurs him into making such an important decision that will change his life as well as the life of many other people. I feel that considering Oscar is potentially going to be a very important character who will contribute a lot to the story, fleshing out his development in this volume was necessary, and I feel it was handled quite poorly. I'd have actually preferred having an entire episode dedicated to Oscar and leave Ren's backstory for a later episode. That said, seeing Hazel again in this volume was absolutely amazing. I wish I could smash ATMs to make money come out of them. I mean, come on, who doesn't? So those are my thoughts on this episode. Hopefully you enjoyed this video and you are as happy as I am to finally see Renora confirmation. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Like this video if you did, subscribe to my channel for more, and hopefully I will see you again soon.